Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov dismissed European efforts to provide Ukraine with security guarantees as a road to nowhere without Moscow's participation. Lavrov said any foreign troop deployment in Ukraine would be absolutely unacceptable, accusing Western nations of forming an anti-Russian alliance to undermine Trump-Putin peace efforts. He stressed security talks must include Russia to be credible. Meanwhile, about 10 nations in the Coalition of the Willing say they're prepared to deploy forces, though largely for rear echelon roles. The UK, France, Poland, and the US are expected to focus on air patrols, with Trump emphasizing America's role in aerial defense. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has reportedly offered Budapest as a neutral venue for peace talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, following US President Donald Trump's calls with both leaders. Bloomberg reported the proposal, though Orban has not confirmed it publicly. While supportive of diplomacy, Orban opposes Ukraine's NATO and EU membership, holding veto power over its accession. President Trump raised EU membership as a security guarantee, which Orban rejected. Critics in Europe, including Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, opposed Budapest as a venue, while French President Emmanuel Macron suggested Geneva instead. Switzerland has also offered, but faces neutrality concerns due to sanctions on Russia. At a United Nations Security Council briefing, Russian Deputy Envoy Dmitry Polyansky accused Ukraine of supplying weapons, drones, and training to militants in Africa's Sahel region. He alleged Kyiv's intelligence services were involved in subversive activities and called for investigations. Polyansky criticized the UN for overlooking Western interference, citing NATO's role in Libya in 2011. He also accused France of backing jihadist groups to enforce neo-colonial policies. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have previously expelled French forces and accused both France and Ukraine of supporting armed groups. The UK government has begun contacting landlords to house tens of thousands of asylum seekers in private rentals after a court ordered the closure of the Bell Hotel in Essex, where an Ethiopian migrant allegedly assaulted a 14-year-old girl. The High Court ruling, sought by Epping Forest Council, may trigger nationwide legal challenges, with Nigel Farage pledging action from Reform UK-controlled councils and even some Labour-led councils joining. The Home Office is targeting 5,000 two-bedroom homes to accommodate 20,000 migrants, despite concerns about worsening housing shortages and risks to women's safety. Recent protests follow cases of migrants accused of violent assaults. President Trump wrote on Truth Social that Ukraine cannot win its war by only defending itself, criticizing former President Joe Biden for restricting Kyiv to defense. Comparing war to sports, Trump said there's no chance of winning without offense. He noted that during Alaska talks, Putin agreed to security guarantees for Ukraine, with Europe providing troops and the U.S. coordinating. President Trump is arranging bilateral talks between Putin and Zelensky, followed by a trilateral summit. Russia's Sergei Lavrov warned foreign deployments would be unacceptable. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis updated the media on the illegal immigrant truck driver accused of killing 3 people in a massive wreck on a Florida highway.
He tried to do a U-turn where it's official use only, and the other car didn't have a chance because it's just totally reckless and out of control driving. He is in custody in California, and I've sent our Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins, who's Green Beret, he knows operations. He is over there in California. He's going to be taking possession of this illegal alien truck driver. We're extraditing him back to Florida. He will arrive in Florida today, and he will get the book thrown at him very shortly after that, I can guarantee you.
We'll be back with another news break at the top of the next hour.
And actually, won't be back next hour because we only have a 1-hour show in the morning. Well, if you're in Australia, it's in the morning. If you're in the US, it is at 7 p.m. And if you're in the UK, it's midnight. And if you're in Australia, it's 9 a.m. And then we have the lunchtime, well, 1 o'clock anyway, 12 o'clock in Japan. It's about 3 a.m. in the UK and something like that too for the US. And then now, our normal time for 1 hour. You will notice though that the shows go almost immediately up on YouTube and Rumble, and you can watch those and catch up on the latest. So if you can't make it for this part, it's going to be hanging around for a mighty long time. Okay, so welcome to The World Today. and I'm Mike Ryan. Looking at what's happening in Australia right now, a lot of misinformation, isn't it? A lot of misinformation. Misinformation on the Israeli conflict, a lot of misinformation on the conflict between NATO and Russia, a lot of misinformation on the China-Taiwan situation, a lot of misinformation on climate. It's a terrible thing. I mean, climate change is going to destroy the earth. We're going to freeze, boil, drown, all that sort of stuff. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to think what to say here. Climate change, sure, the earth is going through a process called climate change. It has been, though, for millions and millions of years. Little old you or me doesn't make any difference. And unfortunately, we have those that the invisible catastrophes. That's what it is, invisible catastrophes. The oceans are not rising, according to NASA. The oceans, if you look at the landmass for a lot of the Pacific islands, they're actually increasing in landmass. There's a mark in Sydney, which was chalked out probably 120, 130 years ago. It hasn't risen past it. Climate change is just a way for many to make a big, fast buck. Now, Green Senator Peter Stewart Wilson has condemned those for spreading climate change misinformation, citing the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report. The World Economic Forum, they tell the truth. The Global Risk Report, which identifies misinformation and disinformation as the biggest threat to human society. And we need this curbed urgently. He wants to establish an investigation, an inquiry into the impact of misinformation. He doesn't need that, does he? If you're in Australia, you must agree, he doesn't need that. Just go and look at COVID. Look at the misinformation from government, from the medical fraternity, and other individuals and organisations. And look what it did to our country. We haven't recovered. Australia has not recovered. In the UK has not recovered. New Zealand has not recovered. And that was the misinformation. And the misinformation about climate change. Look what they're doing to the cows. The cows are getting very sick. I think it's in the Netherlands, I think, or close to it. The cows are getting sick and dying in great pain with bovar. Oh, stop the cows from emitting harmful gases. It's incredible. Anyway, can play Greens.
Acting Deputy President, information is power. It's an old saying, and that truth has never been more important than right now. And those with agendas who can influence or control the dissemination of information can control public debates, they can control policy in parliaments, and they can even control and influence the outcomes of elections. And there's never been a more important time than now to look at disinformation. Disinformation is the deliberate peddling of lies and deceptions by those who have agendas. Financial agendas, corporate agendas, political agendas, and malicious agendas. The World Economic Forum's Global Risk Reports, 2 years in a row now, in 2024, 2025, have identified misinformation and disinformation as being the biggest threat to human society. The United Nations has identified disinformation as being the biggest blocker to global climate action. That's why I'm proud that the Greens have set up a select committee to look at this issue in this Parliament in the next few weeks.
So there you are. That's the Green Senator Peter Stewart Wilson, and incredible. What's to set up an inquiry into misinformation? He should be ashamed of himself. What is he trying to rewrite history? Of course he is. The misinformation is not from me. It's not from others. Misinformation is from government, those that we were supposed to trust. Whether you could ever trust the government, I wouldn't know about that, but look at the medical fraternity. They lied, and they're still lying. Contrary to all the evidence, they're lying. Cam, we'll play this Zelensky in a second. You want to see a man in denial? You want to see a person in denial? Again, the misinformation with regards to Russia and Ukraine NATO. I mean, it's despicable what they're still telling everybody. The coalition of the groveling, that went to Trump. Help, help, terrible Russia's going to attack us. Absolute lies. We know it's lies, and you know it's lies. Now, Zelensky has stated that the fighting between Russia and Ukraine will continue until he decides it ends. Now, think about it. There's supposed to be a peace meeting between Putin and Zelensky, and that's not going to happen. He says, Zelensky says it will only happen. The peace will only occur when he decides to. Well, what's this guy on about? He's just saying he's not going to. He will not give his blessing to peace unless he says so. So why would you have a meeting? I mean, at the moment they're being thumped anyway. Russia is thumping Ukraine or NATO, even with all the gifts, donations from the wacky EU and also from the US and the UK. I mean, it's being thumped. He doesn't need to. Putin does not need to have a peace deal because he's won. Simple as that. Cam, can you play Zelensky, please?
Ось така Україна ніколи більше в історії не буде примушена до сорому, який русські називають компроміс. Нам потрібен справедливий мир, яким буде наше майбутнє вирішувати тільки нам. І світ це знає, і світ це поважає. Поважає Україну, сприймає Україну рівною. Україна, яка може реально за добу зібрати і об'єднати довкола себе лідерів світу.
So there you are, Zelensky. What do they say in that Australian movie? You got to be dreaming, and that's he is. He's delusional. Just stop, Zelensky. Just stop, because you're not going to win this. We know it's all about money and power and greed. And Martin Seif this morning on our first show this morning was saying that hundreds, 1.5 million or something men have been killed, people have been killed. Not the 100,000 or something they're sprouting. You know, we're talking huge numbers, absolutely huge numbers. So Zelensky needs to stop. Look, we're waiting for our next guest, our first guest for this hour, and we haven't yet seen our guest. So what we may just play a couple of commercials just to see if we can rattle up that guest, and you'll come back to us hopefully with the guy who's just a brilliant guest. So we don't want to lose him if possible. This is the world today.
Our mission at Pets of the Homeless is really simple, and that's to keep vulnerable people and their pets together when they're going through a tough time. Back in 2015, Pets of the Homeless started with a 20-kilo bag of dog food, made it into small packs, put it in a suitcase, and it was just me walking down the streets of Melbourne. One woman on a mission to make a difference. I would share the story on social media,
We've just hit 100,000 meals distributed today.
and the community really responded positively, and it just grew from there.
My name is Kent, and this is Hippo. She's everything to me. She's such a good girl. I got her at a time when I wasn't very stable. I'd come out of prison, I was homeless, but as soon as I got her, I just realised, oh my God, I can't let this dog go. And she's just my best friend. Hippo had a canine equivalent of an ACL injury. I knew there was something really desperately wrong. It was agonising seeing her suffering. My caseworker put me in touch with Pets of the Homeless, and Yvonne said that they could help, and I was just so overjoyed. I wouldn't have been able to get through that medical incident without their help. Like, it just would have been impossible.
That bond between us and our pet is very important, and when someone is going through a really tough time in their life, that bond becomes even more important, and that's what we're trying to protect at Pets of the Homeless. My favourite quote is, "I always wondered why somebody doesn't do something about that. Then I realised I was somebody." My intention wasn't to actually start a charity, it was to help. It was just putting one foot in front of another, and that's how we got to where we are today. We're now in a warehouse. We have about 150 volunteers. We provide on average about 60 to 70,000 meals every single month. We have a network of about 73 community partner organisations that we work with. We've also taken in hundreds of pets into our foster care program, and we've just reached 2.5 million meals distributed.
In the time that I've been volunteering with Pets of the Homeless, I've seen the community grow, numbers of volunteers, pet food packing, got a brand new van, and we can reach more community pantries and reach more people. The community, whether it's the volunteers who are packing the food, who are foster caring, they've got so much love to give.
I think Pets of the Homeless gives people hope. There can be a bit of judgment for people who are homeless and have a dog, but the reality is those dogs have got love and support, and it's so wonderful that Pets of the Homeless are able to help. It really makes a big difference in actual lives. It's really important work.
To the people who have supported Pets of the Homeless over the last 10 years, thank you from the bottom of my heart. There's so many kind people out there, and I'm just grateful for all of them. The work that we need to do is so huge and the need is growing, and we can't do it without the support of our community.
We're today's news talk, The World Today.
Lots of terrible things happening in the world, aren't there? You look at Ukraine. Absolutely dreadful. Look at Israel and Gaza. The carnage just continues. On X, Quad's news network says the Israeli occupation army continues its systematic flattening of residential buildings in Gaza City's El Zaytun neighbourhood, having forcibly removed almost the entire population of the district. Another one here from The Economist. Israel has begun its offensive on Gaza City, the largest remaining civilian centre in the Strip. Gaza is now almost entirely uninhabitable, but the damage isn't solely from Israeli airstrikes. Then we have another one here from, let me see, this one is from Sarah. The UN has declared famine in Gaza. It is the first officially recognised famine in the history of the Middle East. A human-made crime, not a natural tragedy. Israel is deliberately starving Gaza before the eyes of the world. Now, this isn't war. This is calculated extermination. And one here from Dimitri Lascaris. A poll by Israel's Mariv Daily shows 62% of Israelis believe the Netanyahu regime has lost the confidence of the majority of the population. Only 27% answered that the regime has the confidence of the majority, and 11% answer that they didn't know. Also, 26% of the respondents. Our guest is Dimitri Lascaris. He's an activist, journalist, and a lawyer. Thanks for joining us, Dimitri. Can you tell us what really is happening at the moment in Gaza?
An extermination of the Palestinian population is happening right now in Gaza. Israel has systematically destroyed the medical system. There is almost no functioning hospital in Gaza. The little functionality that you have in the hospitals that have survived the onslaught is grossly inadequate to deal not only with the needs, the pressing and enormous needs of the wounded and the starving, but also with preventable disease, which has been made rampant throughout Gaza Strip because of the destruction of the healthcare system. The education system has been destroyed. The water system has been destroyed. Very little uncontaminated water available to the population. The IPC, an organization charged with the responsibility of monitoring food security, has just declared several days ago that there is famine in Gaza, and that some 500,000 Palestinians, which would obviously be overwhelmingly civilians, are suffering catastrophic malnutrition. I could go on and on. The horror is unrelenting, and the totality of the evidence leaves, I think, no doubt in any reasonable person's mind that we are witnessing an attempt to wipe out the population of Gaza.
We often hear about hostages, but do the Israeli families of hostages believe Israel is interested in rescuing the hostages, or is this just words?
Well, based on their public commentary, I think that they are completely unpersuaded that the Israeli government cares at all about the hostages. And in fact, it's the Israeli political elite has acknowledged that the current attempt to take over and effectively destroy Gaza City, where there are, I think, in the range of 800,000 Palestinians sheltering displaced Palestinians, is very likely, or at least highly, there's a high risk that this is going to result in the deaths of certain of these hostages, if not all of them. So I just want to point out, however, that I don't regard the term hostage as an accurate description of the remaining detainees. They are reportedly soldiers, members of the Israeli military who were serving at the time of their seizure, and as such, they are prisoners of war. And the real hostages, the ones you never hear about in the Western corporate media, are the thousands of Palestinian civilians who are being held in Israeli dungeons without any lawful or moral justification, many of them in conditions amounting to torture. And if we're going to bandy that term about, we should apply it at least as often to the Palestinian civilians held in Israeli dungeons as we do to these Israeli soldiers who are actually prisoners of war.
Tell me this: is there anything legal about what's happening in Gaza? Because from what we can see, and what other people from various countries can see, there's nothing legal about it. But the question is, and you probably most definitely agree also, but can these people be made accountable for what is happening?
Just quickly on the legality, even if they weren't carrying out a genocide, the presence of the Israeli military would be illegal. Last year, the International Court of Justice ruled that Gaza and the West Bank are occupied territory in international law, and that their occupation is illegal, and that independently of all the crimes that I mentioned, Israel has a duty under international law to end that occupation as quickly as possible. So as long as there's any occupation going on, Israel is violating international law in Gaza. Now, whether there will be accountability, I believe there will be one day. Hopefully, that accountability will come quickly enough to save those who have survived this onslaught. And if it comes, it will come largely because of pressure at the grassroots level applied to Western governments who are the main backers of Israel.
What about a country or an agency that can stop Israel other than the US? Because for example, in Australia, we have Anthony Albanese, by the way, I don't like very much. I think he left things too late, and I think he's a populist. But at the same time, he is now on the right track. We had in this country, we had a huge protest. I mean, it's happening every week, and every major city in this country had those protests, and they were just normal people. Yet a lot of the media, because you mentioned before, a lot of the media here, they portrayed they took pics and stuff of people who were very excitable, which was a vast minority. You're looking at a dozen. Yet the rest of the 350 to 400,000 that marched were just normal people. Surely this sort of protest and this sort of swell globally, surely they could stop Israel doing what it's doing.
Well, Israel depends for its very existence on Western government support, and the three main backers are the United States government, Germany, and the United Kingdom, but all Western governments at this stage to some extent or another, including the governments, the countries of which I am a citizen, Canada and Greece, and of course Australia. All these countries are complicit to some degree or another. I am, however, very heartened to see that our comrades in Australia are rising to the call to the degree that they are, and seeing this throughout the West, and you're seeing opinion polls reflecting this. There was a poll that just came out in Canada, which is a country steeped in Zionist propaganda for decades, which showed that 52% of Canadians believe that Israel is now committing genocide, and something in the range of 25% disagreed with that proposition. And you see in the United States that the vast majority of Democrats now sympathize more with Palestinians than with Israelis. It's not even a close call. And then you have people within the Republican movement, the MAGA base, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens coming out and saying over and over again that we're witnessing a genocide. We are seeing a sea change, an unprecedented shift in favor of Palestinians, notwithstanding these unseemly tactics of the corporate media to characterize these people as a threat to democracy and so forth. There's a change happening, and sooner or later the divide between public opinion and the actions and policies of the political elite will become so great that there will be a rupture in Western government support for Israel. That is something that I strongly believe will happen. The question is, how many people must die before it does happen?
What's the ultimate aim? I mean, we talk about it and we discuss with other journos and stuff, that it's just to make Israel bigger. That they want the land. They want to be a real force. I saw that someone was saying, I think it was Netanyahu, was saying that the world now understands that we're for real. We're to be feared, all that sort of garbage. You hear from all sorts of crazy people. What do you think their goal is?
Well, Netanyahu just gave an interview on 24 News in Israel, which, I reported upon this on Reason to Resist, and I analyzed the interview as well as I could. And it was, in my opinion, effectively a staged event in which a former far-right member of the Israeli Knesset handed Netanyahu an amulet, which was in a box. We didn't actually see it. Netanyahu made sure that we all noticed the box, and the amulet apparently is a representation of Greater Israel. And I think that one of the reasons why Netanyahu didn't actually remove the amulet, for which he expressed a great deal of fondness and agreement, he said very clearly, I'm absolutely committed to the concept of Greater Israel. It's because he doesn't want us to know just how expansive the borders of Greater Israel are. It could, at the bare minimum, it would include the West Bank and Gaza, bare minimum, plus the occupied Syrian Golan Heights, which Israel has illegally annexed. But the more expansive version of Greater Israel include the Sinai, and even a strip of land on the western bank of the Nile, and also Jordan, or much of Jordan, Lebanon, northern Saudi Arabia, and the majority of Syria and Iraq. There are people in Israeli society and Israel's political elite, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir in particular, who openly adopt that more expansive version of Greater Israel. So there should be no illusion in anybody's mind about what's happening here. The more we allow Israel to get away with these crimes, the more ambitious.
We've lost Dimitri there, but we do get the impression he's having some trouble with his internet. He's just come back again just to finish up. Dimitri, we thought you'd been kidnapped or something, but you're back. Just quickly, you were saying?
The the more expansive concept of Greater Israel not only includes Gaza and the Syrian Golan Heights, it also includes the Sinai, Tripoli, the west of the Nile, Jordan, northern Saudi Arabia, and about 2/3 of Iraq and Syria, and all of Lebanon. And there are people in the Israeli society who espouse that grander vision of Greater Israel. And I think that that's ultimately where we're heading unless we do have accountability. I mean, if they get away with the extermination of the Palestinian people, why wouldn't they go for this extreme expansionism? And that means that you would be destabilizing the entire region, even to a greater degree than it currently destabilized.
Yeah, it's a situation that I think will get worse before it gets better. Dimitri Lascaris, who's an activist, journalist and lawyer, if somebody wants to find out more about you or to read your post or get involved, how would they do that?
So my main activity is our YouTube program. It's called Reason to Resist. It's also available on Rumble, and I'm very active on X at Dimitri Lascaris.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for your time, Dimitri. This is The World Today.
What is Australia's deadliest predator? The one that hits with more than 30 Gs of force, strikes in under a second, leaves catastrophic injury in its wake. You won't hear it, you won't see it, not until it's too late. Australia's deadliest predator isn't found in the wild. It's on our roads. Speeding is the killer.
The earlier cancer is found, the better our chances of treating it.
Lung cancer screening is available for people with a smoking history. To find out if you're eligible for a free scan,
see a doctor or a health professional.
It could save your life.
I want to be the best dad that I can be.
I will be her biggest fan.
I want to be his superhero.
I love being connected to my kids.
She means the world to me.
It's going to be so much fun.
I love being his dad and his best mate.
She is very special to me.
With the latest information and analysis of major events from around the world, this is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And back again now. We just lost our part of our program there. Cam, too early. Dr. Frank Romano is an author and Middle East analyst and going to be a regular here at the World Today. And we're looking at, again, continuing the discussion on the Israel-Gaza conflict. Frank, thanks for joining us. Could you tell me about this deliberate engineering of famine? The US, do you think the US is equally complicit here? We've lost Frank. Frank, you need to turn your microphone on. The button says on.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I believe the United States is completely complicit. this famine, that famine that we've talked about, and also Dimitri talked about the IPC decision that's been ratified by the UN, an official ratification. The UN has been tiptoeing through the tulips about this for a long time, making statements, but this is official. Why then is the US so complicit? Because this famine that has extended throughout Gaza has been exacerbated by the occupation, by the Israeli considered efforts to keep out humanitarian aid, as it did to keep out the Honduras I was just in and other flotilla missions, and including closing the Rafah Gate and the Kerem Shalem Gate. But the U.S. is enabling Israel to do this. And it's directly accomplished. It's not indirectly accomplished by selling large amounts of arms and aiding and abetting Israel and politically supporting what Israel does worldwide, which, among other things, exacerbates the famine, makes it emboldens Israel to continue what it's doing, depriving Gaza of food, water, and medication, and in particular, it really enhancing this famine.
Tell me, why can't the UN and the relief agencies break the aid blockade? They have food. Do they have any legal authority?
Well, yes, absolutely legal authority. For instance, if we go back far enough, we have the 1907 Hague Regulations, the Fourth Geneva Convention that say an occupying power, just one of the legal regulations that have been violated, international regulations violated by Israel. It is an absolute occupying power. And one of the provisions, we're talking about famine and food right now, is that an occupying power must make it assure that the occupee, that is to say, the Gazan Palestinians and the Palestinians in the West Bank, have proper medical supply and food. So clearly this has been violated. So what can the UN do? Well, the UN, of course, it supports the International Court of Justice decision that the South Africa has brought on genocide, and try to get the International Court of Justice to make its final decision and support the provisional measures, which one of them said, the provisional measures of the International Court of Justice, which are binding, said that Israel cannot impede the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza. And that is why the Freedom Flotilla bringing aid in accordance with this decision is clearly legal, and the blockade, as I think you related, it's an illegal blockade, as well as Dimitri, the former speaker, makes the blockade, which impedes the supply of humanitarian aid, completely illegal. So what can the UN do? Well, the UN can make resolutions. Of course, the problem is the Security Council, which the U.S. has veto power. Now, the General Assembly can make regulations, but they're mainly for advisory purposes. It's really the Security Council decisions that are binding on the world, and the UN could. Now, it can, under its regulations, it can force Israel to open up the gates. It can. Now, this is taking it really way in accordance with what the UN can do. It can organize a military force. Of course, it has to be in accordance with the other countries that will provide the military force. To force Israel to do what it's got to do to stop this famine, it could do this. But as you see politically, most of these Western countries, and even members of the Security Council, are providing arms, weapons, and money, aiding and abetting Israel and allowing it to continue the occupation and continue this famine.
Yeah, I find this really interesting. If you look at history and go back to the Second World War, it's a bit like if you're beaten by your parents or your father when you were younger, there's a strong chance that you might do the same to your children. And I see this, none of us can deny that there was these atrocities in the Second World War. Why are they reenacting a lot of this themselves? I mean, it's sure that we haven't got all the terrible things of Dachau and stuff like that, but at the same time, they are creating mass murder, genocide, starving people, torturing, and all that sort of stuff. Why would they do that if they have a first-hand knowledge on the rights of individuals and the freedoms that they should have?
Well, Mike, you're touching upon an area, the psychological aspects of what is going on, especially with Holocaust survivors. And it's clearly been proven. And in fact, even in my own family, when there's abuse of our parents by their parents, unless they seek some type of therapy, it becomes a vicious cycle of abuse on their children who have nothing to do with the abuse of the parents. So if we look at it, it's a bit simplistic to see it. It's far more profound than that. But if we see the Holocaust survivors arriving in Israel and have been subject to clear oppression and abuse during World War II, turning around and finding a victim as a father or a mother who was abused with respect to their children, it becomes a vicious cycle. And only to be broken, if we can, and I'm not a psychiatrist, but I've studied this deeply, and Mike, you're bringing this up, that people tend to try to ignore this aspect, the psychiatric aspect of what's going on, is there have been Holocaust survivors, however, who have sought therapy and they've broken the cycle. In other words, they don't pass on this viciousness and they don't abuse. And we'll use Palestinians as sort of a metaphorical children, or abuse an innocent party for the suffering that they have been subjected to. They've broken the cycle. They've sought therapy. And one proof of that, Mike, and there are many others, is there was a whole group of Holocaust survivors, about 50 of them, that took out a New York Times ad, very costly, I mean, 20, 30,000, to condemn what was happening in Gaza. Those Holocaust survivors have, in my mind, broken the cycle. But we can go on. And again, this does not justify what's going on, but it can help us understand the psychological makeup of what is really going on in Israel. Why could they be doing this when it wasn't too long ago where they were subject to a disastrous Holocaust, and yet they seem to be imposing the same viciousness on innocent Palestinians.
Yeah, the level of hatred or insanity is just mind-boggling. What should the so-called concerned West do you think, instead of just voting on state recognition at the General Assembly? Because words are very cheap. And at the moment I'm hearing many, many words, but I'm not seeing a whole lot.
Exactly. I mean, really, and this is what we can really do. The Western countries that are really enabling this vicious occupation of Gaza and the West Bank, and continuing famine and disastrous situation, really, as Albanese, the UN advisor to the Middle East expert, has said, what really the countries need to do is really organize a very, very strict boycott, such as what happened to South Africa. That was a clear pressure. Once the United States was involved in the boycott of South Africa, I think the white minority held on to power another 6 or 7 months. So boycott, very powerful. Now, there has been a suggestion, and I don't know if you're going to agree with this, Mike, but there's a new flotilla being organized. And this time, unfortunately, what we were trying to do with the Madeleine, which I was on, and then finally on the Hondola, was to encourage other activists to do the same. And now there's 30 or 45 to 40 boats organizing in Tunisia, Spain, and Morocco to go. And Albanese is saying what we need to do now is some of the Western countries are going to shape up and realize that they're part of this genocide, and that to do something is to protect not just the boats bringing in humanitarian aid, because what they're bringing in is a shot in the dark of what the Gazan Palestinians really need, but to do the same for the trucks that are trying to get into Gaza. Literally, you get into the Rafah gate from between Egypt and Gaza, and then Kerem Shalom between Israel and Gaza, open up and literally force Israel to do what it's got to do. This, of course, is very debatable because saying we're using political pressure. But Dimitri alluded to another thing, that the world is literally in rebellion. It's rising up more and more. But these are just words. Now, I've been a part of these demonstrations. I've organized demonstrations, and after they're over, we don't see much happening. But if the world rises up, and those, in particular the United States, for instance, the backcountry people that support Trump, which the average American still does, are still misinformed, believe it or not, in spite of all the press, about this genocide that they are directly responsible for with their tax dollars and complicit because they're saying nothing about it. With this rising up, these people cannot ignore, and the press can no longer censor what really is happening in the world, and maybe they will be enlightened to pressure their own government and into stop sending weapons and aiding and abetting this genocide in their names.
Yeah, I've said before, I'm sort of the mind boggles at the inability to do things. And you mentioned the flotilla. I mean, that's an extremely dangerous thing. I mean, if you're looking at past performances, not with you, but with people that they don't really care much about, the flotilla is in great trouble. If you had say the flotilla involved, say, a representative from the Australian government, one from the British government, and so therefore, if any of those reps were hurt, then that would be regarded as a direct attack on that particular country. Would something like that work, do you think? Or would that be just probably, as we would say, doing something against the wind? It would just blow back at you.
Well, I think this has happened before. There have been politicians that have been on flotilla missions. And what happens is Israel adjusts its policies. For instance, the Mavi Marmara 2010, which was really one of the first missions of the Freedom Flotilla, was attacked. There were 9 boats and 10 activists were killed, but they were all Turks, you see. And now, if for instance, and that's a good approach, though, really, to Mike, to really see if we can get some very important politicians from different countries. But theoretically, because you have American citizens, UK citizens, Australian citizens on these boats, that attacking them is attacking the country. But of course, if they are mainstream politicians, that would have more weight. And the argument would be even more direct, that this would be a direct attack against the interests of a country, especially with that person on board. But what would happen, and what has happened with the Madeleine and the Hondola, because there were members of the French Parliament, young members, not the Prime Minister of France, but members of the French Parliament. There was a member of the French Parliament on board and a member of the EEC, the EU Parliament, on board. But what Israel does is adapts its interception. In other words, they come in as opposed to shooting, like sort of what they did with the Mavi Marmara. They started shooting even before the Mavi Marmara activists started to resist. They come in peacefully. Well, they pointed guns at us, at the Hondola and the Madeleine, but they lowered the guns. They saw that we had our hands up, and they offer us sandwiches and water, which we refuse. Obviously, we don't smile at them. We don't accept anything they offer. But so what they will do, Mike, they'll simply adapt. And if there are these very well-known politicians, they'll do this type of thing. And as if that politician or anyone else on board, any of the activists, were to accept a sandwich or a bottle of water from the Israeli insurgents on the boat, then they quickly take a picture and use it for propaganda.
Tell me this: if the UN said, "Okay, we're just going to drive through the blockade and take this aid to save people's lives," what would happen?
Now you see, the UN to do this, it would obviously it would have the support of a couple countries' military naval forces. In other words, the UN just says that, as you know, the UN doesn't have a naval force or an army, but it has access to countries that do. And the regulations say they can organize this. So if they go in with, for instance, a Tunisian or even a Chinese or even a Russian, because obviously American naval forces would not do that, would not forcefully go in and even protect some of the aid workers bringing in aid, then we would have maybe a confrontation. What would happen? Probably Israel would have to back off there, because this would be, what these naval forces are doing, and in declaration of, they're simply complying with the International Court of Justice. They're complying with international law. But again, we've seen Israel ignoring international law. But when there's a naval force next to these humanitarian workers, whether it be through the Rafah Gate or the Kerem Shalom Gate on the ground, or whether it be by sea, then, as Albanese has suggested, this might be a day of reckoning where Israel would probably be advised to back off, because if there was an attack against these ships, then that would be more or less a declaration of the Third World War, and these and other countries would jump on board. It would be a mess. But I don't think right now, Mike, there have been threats here and there, but I don't think right now the countries would be in alignment to do something like that, unfortunately.
No, I think they're very weak. I think it's just
very weak. Yes.
Words are cheap. Tell me this, okay, flipping the coin here. Israel now, because the IDF have committed war crimes, so they're going to now have to protect their soldiers from arrest for these war crimes. How would they do that?
Well, for one thing, the war crimes, first of all, the ICC has issued arrest warrants against Netanyahu, and one of its provisions that justify the arrest warrant is Israel is using hunger as a weapon of war. So again, if the ICC then issues more arrest warrants, and this is why Israel and the United States are so opposed to it, because they know they've committed war crimes, and they're trying to protect themselves, such as Trump is trying to protect himself. He knows he's committed war crimes. Biden has, many Americans, Obama, they've committed war crimes. In fact, they're on my complaint that I've issued 4 or 5 years ago. And just getting around, and I will answer this question. What was so surprising is 4 or 5 years ago, after I was released from jail, I finished my complaint and submitted it to the ICC along with El Haq and other lawyers. It took the ICC 5 years until there was a full-blown genocide. I mean, to issue arrest warrants. So to answer your question, Mike, the countries can protect their soldiers and so forth, because with the arrest warrant, Netanyahu or Gallant, who got their arrest warrant, and there was one issued to Hamas agents that apparently have been killed. So that, but if they leave their country, so Netanyahu leave the country, and even flying over an airspace like Italy could force the plane down and arrest Netanyahu and send him to The Hague to stand trial. This can happen, but so far, the countries get around the ICC decisions, which are applying international law, sort of related to your question, Mike. And that, for instance, Netanyahu went to the United States and was protected there, and to Hungary. They did not obviously arrest Netanyahu, but these countries that are subject, that are to severe international violations, simply ignore them. And not only ignore these decisions, get around them, but also we see Trump sanctioning the ICC judges. Israel has threatened to do so. I'm not sure if they've officially sanctioned them, so that the United States can confiscate any any property they have, not allow any ICC judges or anyone else related to the ICC, including myself, to even enter the United States. They could do that to me, since I was a part of this complaint against Netanyahu, and working in line with the prosecutor of the ICC, Benzouda. So in other words, to answer your question more directly, Ryan, these countries that are severely in violations of severe violation of international law, like Israel, like the United States, get around it that way. And unless there's some type of accountability, the other countries, the other signature countries, which most countries in the world are signatures of the ICC, I'm just giving that as an example, Mike, they are required to comply with an ICC decision. But we see Hungary, that's a member of the ICC. It says, well, we haven't ratified the ICC. It is a member of the ICC. The United States not being, but still required to comply with ICC rulings, which they are not doing.
So is the ICC then, does it lack the teeth it needs? Because if you have this happening, and supported by many other countries too, it would show you that the ICC is basically it's a vicious animal without teeth.
Exactly, and really, in reality, the only leverage it really has, Mike, is that arrest warrant, because the arrest warrant issued is for life. There is no statute of limitations on it. But unfortunately, as opposed to almost every criminal justice system in the world, the ICC cannot judge in absentia. In other words, the defendant accused of war crimes, such as Netanyahu, who is accused, has to be in The Hague standing trial in person to be able to be condemned for war crimes, and then condemned to at least 30 years or maybe a life term. So not to be able to judge in absentia gives it little teeth. That is to say, if Netanyahu were condemned as a war criminal, then that would give it more teeth, because apart from the arrest warrant that it would have, all the countries know that here we have a condemned defendant here for war crimes. It would probably add more teeth, at least psychological teeth, to them arresting Netanyahu if he left the country, because they would be helping a condemned war criminal, which means they are an accomplice to this war criminal if they aid and abet this war criminal. But unfortunately, just like you alluded to, Mike, the ICC has very little teeth, and unless it has other countries that support it, like the UN too, in arresting and in complying with any of its decisions, it has really very little power, unfortunately.
And there goes the whole conundrum. It becomes something that we will just have words. The flotilla, I think, is a great idea. I don't feel that comfortable with their safety, because who knows what will happen. You get a couple of angry IDF people or a couple of angry people, and anything could happen. But I think we have to do something. And here I am saying that we just have words. That's all I can do. Governments can do more than just words, and we need to do more than just words, because innocent people are dying. And I always think about those poor children, the fear, the terror they have, the parents wondering what's happening to their children, the fear and the terror, and they do not deserve it. This is not how we should act as humans.
Well, you see, Mike, your words as media are clearly more than just words. Politicians are throwing out words left and right, and we know, unfortunately, the reason behind them is simply to preserve their money of power, nourished by greed. Often they're not really seriously empathetic with, for instance, the struggling of the Gazan people, where your words are transmitted to the world. Without what you're doing, what the media is doing, we can't do anything. The flotilla can't do anything, because we're not reaching the living rooms of people to show what we've done is an act of desperation. And you're right. Why this is a risky thing to do, but it had to be done. I don't believe in this hero stuff. It's something that, Mike, we had to do. and it's something we can do tangibly. And then when I was called to Malta, I was in Malta all the way through the Madeleine, kicked off the Madeleine right before it launched, and then finally became the owner of that gondola, and then went to try to get to Gaza, almost got to Gaza. Been there a long time, and subjecting to not being able to see my kids and family for a long time. But it was something we had to do, Mike, because this is direct action. When I was called to Malta, I was in the middle of doing a film on the Palestinian resistance based upon Love and Terror in the Middle East, my book. But that's indirect action. Direct action was something that takes precedence, and it's desperate in a way. But like your action as media is clearly very important, and your words are far more than just words. Well, why is what we did so risky? Well, Shiatet 13 is the commandos that they send to intercept us. It is one of the most vicious commandos in the entire Israeli naval force, or they can also be in the army, because they were sent, as you recall, a couple of years ago to the hospital. What was it? Shatia Hospital. What's the name of that hospital? That it was sent to clean it up, and it's in the news. I'll get the name of it. And what it did, it went in, it cleaned up things. It would kill babies in cribs, killed women and children, buried people alive. This is the same group that intercepted us, and we knew what we were getting into. We trained for this, Mike. And again, it's something we had to do with direct action, because we're sending a message. All of us on that gondola and the Madeleine and other Freedom Attila boats have a lot to lose. And so because we're trying to send a message out saying, if we have such a lot to lose and we're taking such a risk, maybe what we're doing is credible, and maybe some people that are still on the fence about the genocide will be convinced that this is a true genocide, and we've got to do something about it.
Frank, you do more than just words, and I'm proud to regard you as a colleague and friend, and I thank you very much for your time and what you're doing for humanity. Now, if somebody wants to find out just a bit more about you, Frank, how do they do that?
They can just go on my website, Frank. Let's see, it's Love and Terror 5, or Frank Love and Terror 5 at gmail.com, or .com, and just put in Frank Romano and the Honda or something like that, and you'll see, you can get to my data and Facebook. Everything's out in the open, and please contact me, and we'll continue this discussion anytime. Thank you, and thanks for having me on your program. I'm looking forward to working with you, Mike.
And likewise, too, I think your insight is invaluable. Dr. Frank Romano, author and Middle East analyst, thank you very much. This is The World Today.